In the previous video, we've calculated the theoretical or the intrinsic value of a right. In the real world, the right will not always trade at its theoretical value. And there's multiple reasons for this. First, in the real world, there's transaction costs, and here we just assume there's no transaction costs, right? But if every time I trade rights, I have to pay a certain cost, then that's obviously going to reduce their value. The other reason is that there can be a lot of enthusiasm for the new offering, and I'm going to kind of leave it at that here, but think about the theoretical value a little bit as the intrinsic value when we're going to talk about options later. So I know that right now, if you've never talked about options, this might be a little bit confusing, but when we talk about options, we're going to calculate the intrinsic value of the option, and we're going to see that the price is usually higher than the intrinsic value. And the reason is the option offers two things: kind of a form of leverage, and it also offer a little bit of a insurance. Okay, and rights are pretty similar to options, and so they also provide both of these advantages, and that's why their price is usually going to be a little bit higher than their theoretical value. The theoretical value, right, is just the value, like if you bought them and changed them into a share right now, how much would you get in value out of that? But before they expire, because of the two elements I just said, they usually have a little bit more value than that. Ultimately, though, rights offering should not cause a change in the wealth of the shareholders, right? If they decide to they don't want the rights, they don't want to exercise them, then they could just sell them, right? And they should get that value today. And otherwise, they could just decide to exercise the right, and then they get that value generated by the rights. So it doesn't really matter. There's a bit of dilution in one case, right? If I don't use my rights, I'm going to lose a bit of my the percentage of the firm that I own, but ultimately it shouldn't change the position of the shareholders. They do present advantage for the firm's point of view, though. First, our current shareholders are a really good market for issuing new equity. Those are shareholders that are interested in our firm, so they are more likely to be interested. On top of it, it will reduce dilution by giving them the first right to buy share, right? And by giving them the first option to keep those rights if they want them and use them, it means we're giving them an option to not have any dilution. They can just keep the same percentage ownership of the firm as they had before. It's also less costly. I said that before, but it is less costly than a season offering or a share offering. The transaction cost is lower usually. And it also may generate more interest than an actual share offering because of the derivative nature of the rights. As I explained earlier, right, they kind of give you a lot of leverage, and that basically leads to people sometimes being really interested in it because depending on the investor type, but some people really like these high risk, high reward type of financial instrument, and that definitely does this here. Okay, the last thing I want to discuss in chapter 17 is poison pills. I won't make you do any math questions related to poison pills. You should just know what they are and a little bit the arguments for and against. Okay, poison pills are just a method to ward off potential hostile takeover. So a shareholder or another firm trying to acquire at least 51% of the shares, or 50% plus one of the shares. And if that were to happen, then there would be a controlling shareholders basically, and they would be able to do all the decision that they want, right? So that's a takeover. The poison pill works like this. Once a shareholder acquires a certain percentage of the firm or the shares of the firm, the other shareholders will automatically receive right to purchase additional shares at a discounted price. And because the right is to purchase the new shares at a discounted price, well, then the other shareholders are likely to use it. This just means that as soon as a potential shareholders reach the trigger point, let's say it's 20%, then everyone else will start buying shares, and that's going to dilute the ownership of the person who's trying to do a hostile takeover. So that's what I say here. There's argument for and against poison pill, and who you ask might have a different reasoning here. But I wrote two here that I think are important and valid reason. So one for and one against. One group of investors would say, well, poison pill will scare away potential takeovers, right? It's much, much more expensive to do a takeover if there's a poison pill. And so that reduced the value of the shareholders. And the reason is when you do an hostile takeover, when you do a tender offer or try to buy a lot of shares of the same company, this tends to push up the price. And so that creates value for the shareholders as the price goes up. Okay. And if there's no hostile takeover, well, that's never going to happen. The other argument is so this argument here, right, is an argument against the poison pill. This argument here is an argument for it. Some people will say, well, since it scares away the potential takeover bids, right, then management can just run the business without worrying about a potential takeover. And so they can just keep running the business without always having to look over their shoulders and make decision to boost the share price and concentrate hopefully a little bit more on the long-term success of the firm. Okay, that is everything I had to say about chapter 17.